All right, Premier. So you know what? Thank you for doing this. I was gonna wear my hat,
Oh, do.
my Alberta hat
He got in
here.
trouble last time for wearing a backwards cap on
I
air.
did. Folks thought I was
I told him, don't read the comments. Who cares? Just wear the hat.
an alt-right conspiracy theorist with a backwards hat. So I'm gonna avoid that controversy.
That is a very common
But there
way
you go.
of wearing a hat in my province.
Well, thank you for doing this. I
Thank
know
you
that
so
you've been
much.
very busy traveling around. We want to start not on the news, but with your backgrounds. We want to start with a woman who was a drive-through diner worker and a gentleman who worked at Firestone Tires. Sharon and Doug, your parents. So what values did they instill in you when you were growing up?
The first thing that comes to my mind is permanence. That's the nice part. Mom saw Dad. She called him Ducky because she spotted him at an outdoor arena when she was in junior high, and he was wearing a little ducky sweater. He was into ugly Christmas sweaters apparently before anyone else. But then they ended up being on a blind date together with the opposite. He was with her best friend and she was with his best friend. And by the end of the evening, they were together, and they've been together ever since. So they've been together they got married at 18 and 19, had 5 kids before Mom was 30, and are each other's best friends. And so having parents who've stayed together with 5 siblings, 5 kids in the family, and we all still talk to each other and all turned out pretty normal.
Where do you fall on that lineup of
I'm
kids?
second oldest. So I was a little bit of a proxy parent for the 3 younger ones. But that to me, family is just so core. Just being able to have that as your home base. My career, as you've seen, has been a little bit rocky. And Mom and Dad have always been my biggest supporter. And it's so valuable to have that.
Yeah, and besides your parents, obviously, your upbringing included, you talked about living in subsidized housing, working some service jobs. How did that kind of shape who you've become today?
You know what's interesting about my parents? So the Merrill Park was where we lived, and it initially, and you can imagine when you're an 18, 19-year-old kid and you're fresh out and neither of them came from money, having kids right away was difficult. But they got their first house very early on. I think we moved into it when I was 4. And it was a great grandma's 700 square foot bungalow. And that's what I watched, that you buy your first house and get a little equity. And then you upgrade to your next house and get a little bit more equity. And then they got their forever home that they're still in when I was 10 years old in 1981. So to me, that's the thing that I was able to see, which again, I'm so grateful for, is that you don't start at the top of the heap when you're beginning your career. You actually have to work and go to school and get promotions and then just keep on striving. And my parents have always lived that. I mean, I talk about my mom as the original super mom, because not only did she have 5 kids, but she began as a fast food worker, worked at the bank, worked at the post office, or was a worker at the city and waterworks, and then started working in the oil patch and did joint venture accounting by the time she was done, got a degree along the way. So you look at that and say, I'm a bit of a slacker compared to my mom. But the two of them have really, I think, been a wonderful role models for me and my sibs.
Yeah, that's amazing. My parents, my dad worked at Calgary Co-op when I was growing up. My mom started working at Revelstoke and then became a teacher. But I mean, we talked a lot about politics in my household. I don't know about yours around the dinner table. Did you?
We did. I think it was mostly when I got into social studies junior high. And maybe this has always been the case, that you end up with some left-wing profs who think communism is great. And so they're talking about that. And my dad, who has Ukrainian heritage, obviously didn't think much of how Stalin treated Ukrainians, and went and gave my teacher hell, and then started realizing we needed to talk about politics and how it mattered. My dad was a really huge fan of Brian Mulroney, because we were very hurt in Alberta through the policies of Pierre Trudeau with the National Energy Program. There were lots of job losses with the inflation and interest rates and wage and price controls. And what my dad saw is that when Brian Mulroney came in, ended the National Energy Program, got wages and prices under control, lowered interest rates so people could afford houses again, negotiated a free trade agreement. I was able to hear all of that before I was able to vote. And so I became naturally, I think, more progressive conservative, which was the very first party that I joined when I had a chance to in 92 when I was approaching my first time to vote.
Right.
But before that, you were at the University of Calgary. You had a really interesting class. You had Naheed Nenshi.
Ezra Levant
Ezra
was in
Levant.
it. And Peter Lougheed was one of your professors. Is that right?
It's true. It was a Model First Ministers Conference, which is really funny because now I've participated in a lot of First Ministers Conference. I know that the leader of the opposition always forgets what role I played, so I should correct the record with you because he has said I was in the media. I was not. Marie Radchik was on the media team, is my memory. I was on the federal team as the Indigenous Relations Minister, and there were a couple who were on the Alberta team, including somebody who would become my future husband, Sean McKinsley, Rob Anders, who became an MP. Yeah. And Sean Howard, who worked for me actually the first time I was in office with the Wild Rose, Kevin Bosch, who's also I just saw him. He's also a very prominent Liberal. Right. He was on the Quebec team, I think, maybe along with Naheed Nenshi, who I think was on the Quebec team as well. And so what we did is, as you can imagine, there were issues that we had to address, come to the table, and then be able to negotiate and get our position through. And the Alberta team, we all shared this political club's office, and they made the dumb decision of leaving their strategy paper around. And a friend of mine knows I was pretty competitive, so stole it, copied it, gave it to me. And then I was able to outmaneuver them at the table and got accolades from Peter Lougheed when he moderated the session. We won that one using the Alberta points against them because they have to map out what their strategy is. So that was fun. They never some of the guys on that team never really forgave me.
Yeah, we kind of honed your skills there dealing with fictional political issues. There's a lot of issues right now that you're dealing with locally, and also when it comes to Canada as well. We'll talk about your meeting with the Prime Minister shortly, but on an issue in Alberta right now that's going on, the teacher strike. So over 700,000 students out of class, families scrambling. What is the plan to get students back in classrooms in Alberta?
I'm just so disappointed that I came to this because we actually were making great progress at the table. The union leadership was bringing issues forward, and we were saying yes. What, need a wage increase? Yes. I mean, we need to have an adjustment on the pay scale so that it's comparable to other provinces in Western Canada. Yes. Need more teachers? Yes. We'll hire 3,000 more. Need more education assistants? Yes. We proactively put that on the table too. And yet both times that the ATA took their negotiated settlement back to the teachers said no. So what we've told the bosses is figure out what it is that is going to get your members to a yes, because obviously there's a bit of a disconnect there. But we've stood ready to hear what some of those issues are. We want a fair deal and a reasonable deal. I think what we're seeing, and this is probably the case in every jurisdiction, is that with the massive increase in immigration in the last couple of years in particular, we just haven't been able to keep up with building the number of schools that we need. I mean, normally we'd get about 50,000 newcomers into Alberta each year. We got 150,000 a year, so 450 over 3 years, of which about 80,000 were students. And so trying to get that many kids in existing school spaces, you're going to end up with overcrowded classrooms. If you've got people coming from war-torn countries, as we do, we offered sanctuary to 65,000 Ukrainians. You've got young people who are probably experiencing trauma, don't know the language. That adds additional complexity to the classroom. So I'm very sympathetic about the need for us to find ways to be able to make class sizes more manageable. And that's why we also put on a table an $8.6 billion school build, but it takes some time. We're not going to have that until 2030. So we're trying to identify the way to address the issues, but we haven't been able to break through with teachers just yet.
At some point, would you consider back to work legislation?
I don't love having to do that. I prefer negotiated settlements. I think that you end up with a better outcome if people can get to the table negotiated. I mean, I accept that striking is part of the collective bargaining, and that's one of the powers that they possess. I just think it's a shame. We're right now in a lose situation because the union did not have money set aside for strike pay, so teachers are out of pocket on that. The teachers also don't pay for their dental and medical benefits. The employer does. So at the moment, the union is covering that, and I hope they have the money to be able to continue doing that. But parents are inconvenienced because they obviously rely on schools, not just as to be able to work, but obviously to be able to give good education to their kids. And the kids are disrupted too. I feel particularly badly for the high school kids who are using the semester to try to get some of their requirements for university. That's being disrupted too. So it's just lose all around. And it's unfortunate that it came to this point.
Let me just ask you one more question on education, because there is, some blowback that you're getting around this pilot project that is around private school construction. What's your take on that, and why do you think it is important to have this pilot project?
Well, we believe that parents have a right to choose the kind of education they want for their kids, and there's lots of parents who choose to have to send their kids to enrichment programs. That's what we're seeing with some of the arts programs or science-based or STEM-based programs. We have all girls schools as well. We've got arts academies, classical learning academy. We even have Renfrew Academy, which has special programs to be able to address kids who have special learning needs. There's a new private school in Edmonton that is developing special programming for autism. And so that's just the culture in Alberta, is that we have public schools, we've got Catholic schools, we've got Francophone schools, and we also have an array of independent schools and charter schools. And we're looking at ways to be able to support that, because parents who send their kids to independent schools are taxpayers too. And so if they have a portion of their tax dollars flowing through to them, that just seems fair to me. I think the other way I look at it is that it actually saves taxpayer money. If parents are willing to pay for a portion of their child's own education, it costs us less money, puts less pressure on an already overburdened public school system, and we might learn a few things that can then become programs that can come over into the public system. I think is a perfect way to operate the education system.
Okay. So diversity of choice, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was gonna say people have lost elections in Ontario based on private school vouchers and that sort of thing. So it's quite controversial.
I was on a Canada Strong and Free event when I've been out here. And they're a conservative advocacy group. Initially started by Preston Manning, and now it's changed over time. But I have said that conservatism is not the same in every part of the country. Sure. Conservatism in Ontario is a little bit different than conservatism in Alberta. I would say it's going to be and we're about to find out. As I was here, I learned that the unions have put forward a petition campaign. They want to end funding to alternative options, and so I'll be very interested to see if they get the number of signatures for that. I hope not. I hope that Albertans are, as I think they are, that they want to be able to maintain choice in the education system.
You recently had a meeting with the new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. What was that like?
Well, I'm encouraged. I mean, I think it's certainly gone better meeting with him than it has with his predecessor. You have to.
Why is that?
Well, there's a couple things. You have to remember that Justin Trudeau spent the last 10 years putting in more and more aggressive policies that were targeting our oil and gas industry. I think that especially with Stephen Guilbeault, I think they had this idea that the entire industrialized economy of Canada would be able to operate on wind and solar and batteries, and that's just not the reality. The world needs more oil. The world needs more natural gas. As we're about to get into this AI data center competition, the most obvious and fastest way to get to market with new power is natural gas. And so where we are now is at odds with the thinking of the last 10 years, and I think we're seeing some understanding of that by this Prime Minister. Remember, the first thing he did when he got in was to eliminate the retail carbon tax, which was hitting Albertans particularly hard. He also campaigned on being an energy superpower. And he also has suspended the net zero vehicles, which is one of the 9 bad laws that we identified that needed to be repealed. So what we're seeing is there's a recognition that the way some of those laws were implemented just doesn't make sense. And so we're just trying to push them along on some of the other laws to see those repealed or revised too.
So I know that you're not going to get into specifics of the conversation, but obviously you are very optimistic about this pipeline. You say that, it's about 80%, 20%, 80% in agreement. What's that 20% hold up, though?
I would say that it's a matter of our views around carbon pricing. We have been a leader in carbon pricing since 2007. We created a program where industries have to be at the level of the average for emissions. And if they're above the average, they have to pay into a fund. And if they're below the average, they get credits and they're able to sell them. And so it's worked for us. We've managed to receive and distribute about $2 billion worth of funds that has supported a number of nascent industries. So hydrogen, bitumen beyond combustion. We have funded geothermal. We funded lithium-hosted brine. We have funded projects looking at nuclear energy, especially small modular reactors. So it's worked for us. And so we now know that for some of these big projects, like the Pathways project, which is going to be quite expensive, $10 to $20 billion, that what we want to do is now recycle those dollars back to the company. So it's almost like a mandatory spend. As long as you're willing to spend your money on doing emissions abatement, we'll let you keep that rather than us take it and decide how to spend it. So those are the kind of things that are still, I think, needing to be hammered out. I think that the Prime Minister also believes in carbon pricing.
Right.
But unfortunately, with federal governments, they always think they can do things better than the provincial governments. They can't, and so we're not interested in giving up that authority because we think it works for us. The other thing, of course, is that we have to be looking at this as an exercise of getting up our products to new markets. So I was encouraged to see, and we'll probably talk about this in a minute, encouraged to see that President Trump reiterated what he's been saying for many months, that he wants a restart on Keystone XL 2.0. Yeah. I'm very supportive of that. We've been talking to the administration about that since they got elected. But that doesn't solve the broader problem of us being over-reliant on a single market. We need to get our products to new markets, and the best way to do that is to a bitumen pipeline to the BC coast. So the grand bargain we're talking about is addressing the 9 bad laws, supporting the bitumen pipeline to the West Coast, as well as supporting the Pathways project. And if we can get to an agreement on that, hopefully by Grey Cup, I think that'll be good for us and it'll be good for the country.
That's a reasonable timeline?
That's what we're asking for.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hopefully. You brought up President Trump. How do you think that meeting went between him and the Prime Minister?
Again, better than the last guy. And I think it was, it's no secret that there was personal animus between those two leaders. And I think what we have to know is that oftentimes trade deals get advanced based on the chemistry of the two people who are at the bargaining table. And so although everyone had very high expectations going into this meeting, is if all it was deepening the relationship, staying at one of the presidential residences, as I understand that Prime Minister Carney did, and having a private meeting and building the relationship, that's good. I think we may have got more out of it than that, just reading the newspaper, but that's good. If we can start building on a relationship today that lends itself to having more constructive negotiations when we get into a renegotiation of CUSMA, everyone will benefit from that.
I think you're absolutely right, though, that the President of the United States, he goes a lot on personality, who he clicks with. You were down in Mar-a-Lago before the inauguration. How did you click with him, and how is that relationship going with you?
Well, I can tell you that he's the type of leader where you have to frame your interests in terms of his interests. Right. The way I've put this is, if you go to him and say, if you do this, it will hurt me, or you should do this because it will help me. I say that's not his love language. That is not how you break through the president. You have to talk about, here are my interests and here's how they align with yours. And so I just had one question I wanted to get a yes from him was, do you want more oil and gas from Canada? And his answer was yes. And so I've proceeded with members of his administration and others close to him on that basis, that we need to look at ways that we can support the U.S. in their aspiration. Their aspiration has been pretty clear. They don't want to just be an energy superpower. They want to be energy dominant for a lot of reasons. They do not want to have the strength of their economy dependent on anyone other than themselves. We can then assist them in being able to achieve that if we're able to backfill so that their citizens have low-cost energy, then they're able to take their product and export it internationally to achieve some of their trade and national security interests. And that's, to me, the discussion we need to have. That's what I've put on the table, is that we can not only help to keep American prices low, they also take our product and upgrade it, which helps to have value added. But then it also lends itself to some of their broader national security interests. And we can make that argument on oil, on gas, on AI data centers. We can make it on critical minerals. We can make it on food. We can make it on fiber. Yeah. We just have to be creative in framing it that way.
One of the people that you went down to see President Trump with was Kevin O'Leary, who we've had on.
That's right.
We had a conversation with him.
He's a hoot.
He's doing a big investment in Alberta. He was telling us about that. But also, he wants you to become the next prime minister.
He's a big fan of yours.
What did he say that?
Yes, he does.
That's so funny, because he aspired to that job.
He did.
He thinks you should do it.
Oh my-
What do you think of that?
And his second choice is Doug Ford, by the way.
That is so funny. I love Alberta, really. And what I love about Alberta is that I'm able to talk about Alberta interests, because I think Alberta really is quite unique, and we have a bit of an uphill battle. As you've seen, there isn't a national consensus on getting our products to market, all of our products in all directions, despite what a lot of leaders who wrap themselves in the Canadian flag have said. And so I have a lot of work to do, I think, to make sure that Alberta's interests are taken care of. And that's what I'm focused on.
Well, I know that is the political answer. I'm focused on the job at hand. But would you ever rule out running federally?
Malheureusement, je n'ai pas parlé français, which is the that's I think instantly disqualifying if you can't speak to Quebecers in their own language. I'm going to spend a lot of time in Quebec though, because I think that when I went to the Montreal Chamber of Commerce, and I've gone twice now, once hosted by at a round table and of business leaders, and we did the same thing this time. There are already a lot of Quebec business interests that are in Alberta. The Caisse de dépôt et placement is already invested in a number of companies that do business with us. We just opened up a new training center for pilots with CAE, who has deep inroads not only in aerospace but also in defense, and they want to do more work in Alberta. Quebec is already well advanced in AI data centers, and we think that we can leverage that to develop it in Alberta too. So that's what I'm working on. Is I think that perhaps we have been, all of us are guilty of having been so focused north-south that we haven't been as focused as we needed to be east-west. So I'm going to build those relationships first.
All right.
Well, when we talk about Alberta, we want to talk to you about the renewed talk of Alberta independence. And, obviously it's born out of some of those frustrations that you've talked about, some of those things that you've been platforming and driving forward. Is it a real movement, or is it just born out of that frustration with the federal government?
I've watched the separatist movement for almost all my adult life as I've been following politics. So
it ebbs and flows, doesn't it?
It does.
Pops up sometimes.
I would say probably what was the peak? I can tell you there have been a couple of peaks. One was in 1981 when Gordon Kessler got elected under separatist umbrella, and he ended up getting defeated in the next election by Peter Lougheed, who I think had a very strong Canadian and federalist view of Alberta's role in the federation. But more importantly, I think when Brian Mulroney came in 1984 and ended all those bad policies, the ones I was talking about earlier, especially the National Energy Program, it just took the air right out of it. I watched it rise again as we were getting towards the end of the Chrétien era. Again, that was 9 long years for Alberta with a government that was not necessarily matched with some of the aspirations of the West. And I think it rose around 25 to 30% at that time. Western Standard was a news publication that was operated by Ezra Levant. He'd be able to tell you a little bit more of the history there, but I seem to recall him doing polling and it went that high. And Stephen Harper got elected. And then, again, it dissipated. So this is the next wave, as I think everybody in Alberta was hoping for Pierre Poilievre to win. They were hoping to turn the page on 10 terrible years under the Trudeau Liberals, and they didn't get that. And so the way it is expressing itself is through frustration of people saying, does Canada work? Can Canada work? Do we have to put up with the same terrible policies for the next 10 years that are holding us back? And that's why I'm working so hard to try to get rid of those terrible policies. And I have said this to Prime Minister Carney. Justin Trudeau created this new wave of separatism, but he can end it. He can end it by really demonstrating that he understands the frustrations and taking a different path.
So for you, though, is that conversation, is it helpful or does it hurt what you are trying to achieve as Premier?
Well, I have felt that if I was making progress, then people wouldn't sign the petition. That was how I was looking at it, is let's see what I can do to try to take the fuel out of this myself. Let me be the one saying, yes, we can work with the federal government. Let's try to get to a deal. But unfortunately, it looks like the number of signatures may meet the threshold. There's somebody who is a federalist, Thomas Lukasik, former deputy premier. Yep. He launched a campaign under the old rules, incidentally, 3 months and 295,000 signatures or something. But he just did a couple of news. There was a couple of news articles this week saying he expects to be able to get to that point. And it may well be that he started that with the best of intentions, thinking, I'm going to get all of the folks who are in the Remain movement to come on board. But it means that it's going to prompt a referendum that asks the question, do you want to remain in Canada? Yes or no?
That's right.
And there's consequences to it being a no vote, which I don't want to see. So I think that the ball, it really is in Carney's court. I have taken this movement seriously because I'm on the ground. I did our Alberta Next panel discussions. I hear the anger. I hear the frustration. And I've been very, very forthright with the Prime Minister about what he needs to do and how urgently he needs to do it, which is why we've also been looking to the Grey Cup deadline. Yeah. And we'll see if he meets them.
Well, I mean, I am living in Toronto, but I'd still consider myself an Albertan. And I do sometimes get frustrated that, Alberta's kind of forgotten sometimes when it comes to federal politics.
Oh, we would love to be forgotten. We don't want to be targeted. Like, just quietly let us alone so that we can develop our resources, generate wealth. You can tax it at the federal level and distribute it. But the real issue, I can tell you the turning point is when you've got Eastern-based politicians who will say to Albertans, we don't want what you have to sell, but shut up and keep paying higher into Confederation than you get back. That's how the country works. That is the grave frustration. That's when we've gotten to a bit of a breaking point, is politicians who don't want us to develop our oil and gas, but want us to keep sending significant tax dollars to Ottawa so it can be redistributed to other provinces that don't develop their resources. And I think that's what Albertans have said. Enough is enough. If we're going to be a nation that functions, we've got to be able to trade with each other, but we've also got to be able to open markets so that all of our goods can get to new markets. And I'm pushing the envelope on that. That's what everyone said they wanted. Now I guess we'll see.
I want to ask you as well about censorship.
Oh yeah,
there would not be a need for this platform, as I have said to the Conservative leader, if there wasn't some censorship going on in the mainstream media. But let's talk about Bill C-63. For platforms like ours, what do you think it will mean, and are you worried about the implications of what we could see?
Well, I can tell you our approach in Alberta is that the federal government does have the power of criminal law.
Yeah,
we have the power of non-enforcement, and what that means is we choose our policing priorities, and we choose our Crown prosecution priorities. And I can tell you, if the intention behind it is to do what we're seeing in the UK, where regular citizens are getting hauled off to prison because they post something online that hurts someone's feelings, we are just not enforcing that. There's no way that's not the culture in Alberta. We reaffirmed in our Alberta Bill of Rights that free speech is protected, and we just don't. We think that's a government overreach. The worry I have about how this may, so that's how I think private citizens should be looking at that, is just look at what's happening in other jurisdictions. And we've got to draw a line saying that we have to be able to toughen up. Like there are areas of criminal law where you legitimately cannot say things that subject another group to hatred or violence. Mm-hmm. That's a very high bar, and it should be a high bar. But hurt feelings laws, you can't police them. The worry I have about the independent media is that we're in a world now where the media is so disaggregated. We used to have a national consensus because we all used to sit and watch the 6 o'clock news, and it used to be 3 stations. And the advertising used to go to those 3 stations to be able to support good journalism. And what has happened over time is that all of the ad revenues are going to social media. And so the mainstream media is turning to government sources to be able to get the revenues that they need. And as soon as government starts funding, then government starts playing the tune. And that's what I worry about in independent media. And as it applies to the independent media, I feel like they're trying to put independent media in the same category for Canadian content and all of the rules and restrictions that the CRTC puts on regular broadcast television, which it does not make any sense whatsoever. And I think could be quite not only onerous, but if they're able to, as they can with private broadcasters, pull your license to be able to
That's
broadcast,
what you said. Right?
that's where I worry it's going to end up going. So we'll be a safe haven in Alberta. We'll find a way to maybe we'll have to cut a deal.
Are we gonna go?
We'll have
by the studio.
You just mentioned we'll cut a deal with Elon, with Starlink, so that you can have your little ham radios and do your broadcasting. But I can tell you that is not the pathway we're going down in Alberta. We would be the opposite of that.
Yeah.
I'm listening to what you're saying about censorship and government intervention, but then I'm thinking about the book ban that Alberta
Right.
It's been described that way.
Was looking into, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it's the opposite of that, because you're.
Did you look at any of the images of the books that we're trying to take out of elementary schools?
So you're saying they're pornographic?
There's a picture of a threesome. A
Yeah.
picture of a threesome. There's a picture of oral sex, both male oral sex and female oral sex. There's a picture of an adult pulling down the pants of a child. These are images that are in books, that are in libraries
How did
for
they
K
get
to
in the
12.
libraries?
Good question. But we had parents say, why are these books in the library? And that's when we said, we've got to take those out. Now, the first order, I think, was written in a way that was probably not as clear as it should have been. It
Right.
wasn't just supposed to be an incidental passage in an adult book that may have made reference to sex. That's not what it was about. It was about the images that I was talking about. So we redrafted the ministerial order, made it super clear which books we were concerned about it, made it super clear which school boards were the ones that were allowing it in their elementary schools. And I think we got to a good place.
So Margaret Atwood kind of came at you. I guess, where do you draw the line between protecting kids and policing ideas, and what would you say to Margaret Atwood directly?
Well, if A Handmaid's Tale was a picture book,
Yeah.
then maybe we'd be having some conversations
Right.
about whether or not it should be available to grade 3 students story time.
Yeah.
But it isn't. And in fact, if you go online and you ask what level Handmaid's Tale is designed for, what level of understanding, it is for 17 and 18-year-olds. And so there's no harm in 17 and 18-year-olds being challenged with challenging ideas. Our issue is trying to preserve the innocence of children as long as possible. And images have a way of just sticking in, I think, a child's head. And so we want to make sure that we're protecting them. But no, there was never any intention for it to apply to books that should be, I think, required reading in high school. In fact, I heard that the books that were on Edmonton Public's list, remember, it was Edmonton Public.
Yeah.
There's something called vicious compliance, right?
Yeah.
You say, fine, if you're going to make us do this, here's the full list of books that we're going to remove. And I can tell you, I think what they did is they ran their book list through AI, and any incidental mention of a penis or a vagina, I think, probably ended up prompting a book. That was not what the intention was. But that was Edmonton Public's book
We're going to
list.
show you, basically.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
There's no question that was what was going on there. But the joke that I made, because I heard that all of the books on the book list ended up having a bit of a run at the bookstores. I said, great. If kids are looking to read the sexy bits in Atlas Shrugged and end up reading Atlas Shrugged, I'm all for that. And maybe we should, maybe we'll have a positive outcome if kids inadvertently get exposed to really important philosophical ideas.
Has this become, because, we saw a similar conversation go on in the United States, has it become part of the so-called culture wars? And what do you think of the culture war issues?
I think that most people want to be left alone, really. And most adults want to be able to live their life in their own way, free of government intervention. I think what has happened is that there was a societal consensus around a lot of issues of your body, your choice, even legalizing drugs, saying you can love whoever you want.
Yeah.
But I think what happened is that when activists started going after kids, that's when parents said, hold on a second. Don't expose my children to pornographic materials if I have judged that they are not ready to receive that information.
Right.
Don't transition my child behind my back and not let me know.
Yeah.
Don't send my kids for medicalization without keeping me in the loop as a parent. Even to the issue of cell phones, is that a culture war thing? I mean, we've heard that there's a lot of kids who are having mental health issues because of the incessant comparison and bullying that can happen on social media. So we
They're
stepped in,
addictive to be on the phone,
and
right?
we took that out of the schools. And in fact, that was one that people were quite happy about it, because what everyone was saying was, well, Mr. Smith down in the other class doesn't do this, or the principal would override it, or the school division would override it. And we just said, no, it's across the board. You're not allowed to do that. So I don't go out of my way to try to find things to address.
Do you get accused of that, though, you think?
Well, but there are some who look at the culture war writ large and fight on every issue.
Yeah.
I fight on the ones where I feel like we've got a majority of parents saying, hey, I think they've gone a little bit too far here. And that's okay. I mean, the pendulum swings. Sometimes it swings too far in one way. I think we have. And now we're going to bring it back.
Right. We got to move to the Can't Be Censored, uncensored rapid fire.
Rapid fire.
Who's another premier that you'd pick for a survival hike? Survival being the key word here.
If you have to depend on them for your life.
Wob Canoe.
Really?
100%. Like that guy, what an interesting life he's had.
Yeah.
And I think he still has strong Indigenous heritage. He would probably be able to assist in helping to navigate this. And Manitoba has such difficult environment with all those black flies. Like, I'm telling you, he would be. I would go anywhere with him.
Would you be helpful though to him, or would he just be helpful to you?
I would not wear high heel shoes. I would promise. I would promise that.
One federal policy that you would scrap tomorrow.
Emissions cap and net zero power regs. Have to have two. Both of those. If we're going to, because I care about both of my industries, if we're going to build more oil, we've got to scrap the emissions cap. If we're going to build more AI data centers, we need more natural gas power.
Okay.
Last time you changed your mind on a big issue?
On a big, you know what? Probably on carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And part of the reason for that, this is not rapid.
No, you can go.
I learned about the Haber-Bosch process, and that's where we take nitrogen from the air and mix it with natural gas and turn it into fertilizer, which has allowed us to feed the planet. And so taking CO2 from the air is just another chemistry exercise. So when I read about that, I thought, yeah, we can do this. And we are in Alberta.
Toughest day as premier so far?
There's been a lot of them.
Yeah.
I would say when we had the E. coli outbreak for all those kids, that was because it's such a dangerous infection. And I had to go to the hospital and just see the consequence of those poor little duffers having to get tested just day after day until they got the all clear. That was a sort of a tough month. But that one was really dangerous to so many kids. That was not a good day.
Lighter. What's your favorite stampede treat
or tradition?
Tradition, treat, you pick.
Oh gosh, there's so many. Oh, it started off, I used to love the rides when I was a kid, and then I gravitated to the bars when I was a little bit older, the cowboys. And then I gravitated towards going to rodeo and Chuck's. You know what? I'm going to put Chuck's because I did get to go to them this year, and they've got a new race, the Indian Relay race is what they call it. And it is thrilling. So I think those two together, and it's such a unique event. I don't think there's anywhere else in the world that does chuck wagons. That's a very unique cultural experience in Alberta.
I think this is a good one to end on. In 10 years, Alberta, will it be more independent, more innovative, or more fed up?
More innovative. You know what, Alberta, we just don't, nothing stops us, honestly. I think what I notice about our industry, if you go back and look through our history, and I think it is related to our Western roots, because it was not an easy place to build. We had to entice people to come and break the land there, and there was not the infrastructure to be able to support them. So whether it was through the first farming and the first ranching, the first development of natural gas, the development of oil, trying to figure out how to unlock oil sands to turn that into something. And now we're talking about carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We're talking about hydrogen. We're talking about AI data centers. We're talking about nuclear. I would say that the common thread there is Albertans just try to find the next opportunity to be first at it. And so when you just look at the way that even though we've had 10 years of being suppressed, and we could be so much more, we're still doing well. We're still continuing to develop. We're still the strongest economy in the country. We still have people wanting to move to Alberta in droves. We've had the highest workforce participation rate. We have the highest average weekly earnings, lowest taxes. We continue to attract investment from all sectors. And so I just feel like Albertans will find a way.
All right, Premier
Thank you
Smith,
so much for being
appreciate
here.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.